it's really all about the metrics at the very beginning. Is the senior most team aligned on what the overall company has to accomplish? And are they all measured on those metrics such that they can come to aligned decisions? It works if that happens. It does not work if that doesn't happen.
Welcome to Deliver, the Last Mile Performance Podcast, where we explore what it takes to operate, scale, and differentiate in today's market. I'm your host, Guy Bloch, and I'm the CEO at Brink.
And I'm Raquel Zanoni. Together, Guy and I chat with some of today's most knowledgeable retail and logistics leaders to discuss the last mile, specifically how it's evolving and what success looks like.
Today's guest is Chris Rupp, who has led omni-channel transformation at some of the biggest retailers in the world. She was Executive Vice President and Chief Customers and Digital Officer at Albertsons. She was Chief Customer Officer at Victoria's Secret, and she was the Vice President of both Amazon Prime and Global Fulfillment at Amazon, where she launched the first ever Prime Day and expanded Amazon fulfillment footprint from 4 countries to 9. Well, what stood out most to me in the interview was that promise reliability is the metric that matters most. Chris said, don't chase same-day delivery or tighter windows until you can consistently keep the promises you already make. And if you cannot do it, just don't say it. Raquel, how about you?
I really loved her point on last mile strategies breaking down in execution rather than in boardroom planning. Chris actually told this story from Albertsons, where one holiday weekend and a demand spike exposed labor shortages that no one saw coming. And the fix wasn't more people, it was a system that matched incoming orders to real capacity. But we'll let Chris tell it best. Let's jump into the full conversation, and don't forget to subscribe to get more episodes.
It's an honor to host you today, and we are super excited to really peel back the onion on last mile performance from different perspectives. But let's start with the first question. It's really about the Chief Customer Officer role, which is relatively new in retail, and it means so many different things to different companies. And in some organizations, you can see it sits close to marketing. In others, it's spanned across digital logistics and services. So Chris, throughout your career, from Microsoft to Amazon, Albertsons, and Victoria's Secret, you've been just there in the intersection of customer experience and complex logistics. What is the role of Chief Customer Officer, and what originally drew you into this role?
Well, I have to say, I think that this was a role that was made for me because I've always really enjoyed the psychology of customers and figuring out exactly what they want and how best to give it to them. Way back to the time that I was an assistant buyer at Sears back in the 90s. But, as I went through my career, I spent a lot of time analyzing the customer, using data, going out on the sales floor, getting close to sales associates that understood what customers were doing. And what I have learned is that if you always sort of focus on what they're trying to solve, and then, in a good Amazon fashion, I work backwards from the customer to figure out what we should be doing back in the corporate headquarters to serve the customer better. The Chief Customer Officer really is responsible for tying all of those functions together to make sure that we don't show up in front of the customer like an org chart. So, hey, the fulfillment teams are going to drive for how to get costs down and efficiency up and those kinds of things. And the marketing teams are going to think about how to get more customers through the door. The merchandising teams are going to think about how to bring great products to the customer. But somebody's got to bring it all together so that when it shows up, it's an integrated promise and solution. And that's really the role of the Chief Customer Officer.
Amazing. I think you'll agree with me that many retailers already design customer promises like delivery speed and time windows and tracking, but they design it in one part of the organization and execute it in another. And that disconnect grows as company scales, of course, right? And it often surfaces a broken delivery experience that customers see, but leadership doesn't see it. So,
Right.
from your experience, where do you see the biggest gap between customer experience strategy and last mile execution inside a large retail organization?
Well, I think a couple places. The first one is when the store team doesn't know what great looks like for the customer, and it's left to interpretation. I think you know uh, the store teams thinking about what does a great order look like. They might decide, hey, you've ordered a hamburger for dinner tonight, and we don't have the exact thing that you ordered. The 80-20% and the 1 pound serving. And if I can't fill that exactly, maybe I should just cancel that order off and not give you anything so you're not mad at me. But, if I've ordered 5 other things and I'm trying to put together taco night, I really want the ground beef. It's okay if you substitute something else. And so, helping the store teams to understand what great looks like for the customer, I think is very important. And then also, fulfillment teams will often optimize for things that are in their direct scorecard, which would be speed and cost. But, accuracy may not be left on their plate as something important to them. And if that's not true, then they're not optimizing for the whole customer experience. So, I think these things don't really break down in strategy. They break down in execution in front of the customer when you don't have all of those fine details thought through and have the organization really aligned around what great looks like.
I actually have a little follow up to that because you mentioned accuracy. We actually just released a report around customers' expectations. And I thought it was really interesting that we found speed and price are still important, but they're not necessarily as important as accuracy,
Oof.
which we view as getting the thing that you want when you expected to get it. So my question is really around is there a customer promise, maybe as it relates to accuracy, that you see repeatedly fail once companies try to scale it? And maybe you can give us an example of something you saw. You don't have to name any names,
Oh yeah,
either
no,
Victoria's Secret or Amazon.
I can absolutely share examples. I do think it's in the for one thing, it's in the precision. So, for example, hey, delivering in 2 days is easier than delivering today in a 2 hour window. By the time you get down to you've got a tight window to deliver in, and it's got to be today, and the customer ordered just a couple of hours ago. What you're going to find then is there's labor issues where labor is going up and down, whether it's in store or in the delivery network, and those things really make it difficult for you to hit promise accuracy, and then might also jeopardize the accuracy of the whole order if you're sort of rushing through it to get it out on time. And so the breakdown of those two things is really what makes the customer upset. You said you'd get it here in this 2 hour window. You said you'd bring me the 5 things for taco night, and somehow you've showed up without all 5 things or too late for me to be able to make dinner. And all of those things are upsetting. I would say, a great example I have for you is when I first got to Albertsons, we noticed that there was, a failure rate that was too high in terms of on time, accurate orders. And our orders were mainly not getting shipped out today if the customer placed the order today. They were mainly getting shipped tomorrow. So we had time to take a look at that order and to try and get it right. But we had this one weekend that was, really low in terms of accuracy to customers. And so I wanted to get deep in the details. What I found was I went to this one store and had some conversations, and I figured out that this one store, it was 4th of July weekend, and they were supposed to have a certain number of people on staff, let's say 6 people to pick orders. 2 of the people that were supposed to be on staff called in sick, teenage boys. Their moms took them camping for the weekend. And then the other thing that happened was, 4th of July fell on a different day during the week. than it had the year previously. And it was a Saturday morning. And my goodness, the store got slammed with so many orders between, say, 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. pickup because everybody was leaving for their camping trip. And so between those two things, they didn't have a chance of being able to fill all those orders, and they were having to cancel orders just to let customers know they weren't doing it. So you can imagine how many disappointed customers we had. But, you know, that was way back in 2020. And what we figured out right away is that we would need a way to throttle the orders so that if two people called in sick, we just took fewer orders in the first place, and that we only had so many orders we could take in a certain hour. And if a large order came in, it might fill several order slots as opposed to just one. And when we got that system running, boy, our accuracy level went through the roof.
That's interesting. There's a little bit of learning and revising there. I'm curious because I know you said 2020, which I think is the year everyone all of a sudden was jumping on, of course, the delivery boat.
Yes.
With like there were a lot of retailers that we saw who were launching same day initiatives. Every Victoria's Secret was probably one of them. Lululemon, like we had all of these different brands that I love and I shop at launching same day, but you actually really don't see many of them. Many of them did not maintain their same day initiative. Like they sort of tested the waters a little bit in a few markets, and very few of them kept it. I'm curious if you have thoughts on why those experiments didn't work. Like maybe what they didn't learn or what they realized about either trying to launch that or how it landed that just didn't work.
Well, I think, there's a difference between same day pickup and same day delivery. And I think in many places where same day delivery didn't hold, that the store decided to keep same day pickup available because it's not difficult inside the store environment to have the sales associates who are on the floor picking the orders as those come in. And then setting it aside for a customer to come and pick up. What got to be more difficult was arranging the transportation of that, and then how expensive the transportation for that was, and was the customer really willing to pay for that portion of the order. And so I think a lot of stores just decided that customers were more willing to say, look, I have a gift. I need it today. I'm happy to place the order online to reserve the inventory for myself. I'll run over there and grab it. And I think that that's probably what took root more in the fashion arena. Whereas, say in groceries or other places, like if you can't go to pick up your groceries, having delivery is a very important thing. But, in the fashion arena, it's a different psychology to the purchase.
Chris, let's talk about cross-functional alignment between customer experience, fulfillment, and last mile teams. Easy said than done, right?
Oh, yes.
Because in reality, these groups often they just operate in different with different goals, different data, different definitions of success, which eventually leads to stalled decisions and inconsistent experiences. So my question to you, going back into the Amazon days and launching what we all fell in love eventually, the Prime Day, really required massive alignment between marketing, customer experience, fulfillment, and the last mile teams. What
yes.
did that coordination look like behind the scenes?
Well, for one thing, I think one of the most important debates that we had in designing Prime Day was what day we were going to have it, what day of the year. And, I had done a bunch of research and had come to the conclusion that, Prime was already doing a great job. Amazon was doing a great job at winning customers at holiday, but was doing less of a good job at winning customers at back to school. That was really a lot more local. Walmart, Target, and other retail chains were doing a much better job in back to school than we were. And so what I thought was, if we're going to have a Prime Day, which is a day to give members these wonderful discounts on so many different aspects of the assortment, if we're going to do it, why don't we do it at a time where we really have something else we need to prove to the customer that we're good at? And so I wanted to put Prime Day in July, mid to late July, ahead of back to school, so that, we would be able to sort of stand alone in that time and space and win the customers' minds pre back to school. And so, when I went to the operations team and said that, they said, no way. We build warehouses for holiday. We need to do this in November. And I said, wait a minute. We are already winning at Christmas. And I know that's when we're going to have more capacity for an event like this. But what we really need to win is more hearts and minds. And we can do that in July. So we had this big debate about whether we should put it in November or July. And my point was, if you put it in November, all you're doing is taking their Christmas spending and moving it. It's not going to be as incremental as it would be in July for us. And so eventually I won the argument, and we did have that first Prime Day on July 13th. And it did an amazing job at winning hearts and minds for back to school. Now, that you asked what coordination work was required. I mean, that was just the beginning of it, of course, because, operating an event like Prime Day, all the merchants were bringing in the best deals of the year. We checked every deal to make sure that a better deal had not happened in the prior 6 months, because we wanted to make sure customers were getting a great deal. And so then the day of, it was more like working in air traffic control than it would be working at a retailer, because, you have all of these systems that you have really throttled around the capacity to handle the traffic and the orders, not to mention all the shipping capacity. And so it was really a constant throttling and moving around of the deals, because our traffic was so high, so much higher than we expected in that first Prime Day. We ended up doing more business in that July 13th than we had in the Black Friday 6 months earlier. And so the whole time we were just a little bit nervous that site was going to go down and we were going to stop serving deals to customers. But of course, it didn't, because we just kept moving things around until we could manage the traffic properly. But, we had a war room set up for a couple of days, working around the clock, literally for 2 days, because it was a one-day event, but it happened around the world. So, it happened in different countries at different times.
That's such a great success story. I want to go back to something, though, you said about the debate with you in operations and sort of the vision you had for what Prime Day was going to be versus what they were going to have. And I think we can probably expand this to beyond just Amazon. But where are other examples where you've noticed this disagreement between customer experience and operations? And then maybe you can go a little bit deeper into how you force that decision.
Well, let's see. I think working in any big company where you're working across many teams, and I've done that several times, the very first thing that's important is that you have some form of aligned goals. And, it's really difficult if you have an operations team who only cares about cost. And then within the cost structure that they've built, there are different speed requirements. And, very strong companies will say, look, we're going to have this portion of our business at, say, 2-day shipping or same day shipping because the customer demands it. It is a higher cost. But within that channel, how can I reduce cost so that they're at least looking at a portfolio of shipping services? Nascent companies at this, they started out looking at it as pure added cost, and they didn't really understand the upside to the business. But over time, I think enough times it's been proven that, if you reach customers through a different channel, and a different channel can just be a different speed of delivery, that you're actually adding incremental business. And so, it's really all about the metrics at the very beginning. Is the senior most team aligned on what the overall company has to accomplish? And are they all measured on those metrics such that they can come to aligned decisions? It works if that happens. It does not work if that doesn't happen.
So I want to pick on the metrics, and specifically the metrics when it comes to aligned, unified customer experience and last mile operations. When it gets done well, right? Is there a specific KPI or maybe a set of KPIs that best reflect a unified success?
I think the way to think about that maybe is promise reliability. So I do what I said I was going to do, which is both about time and about the products that you receive. So, it's not just one or the other, because I think either one of those things is going to upset me at this point. You have entered a contract with me if I am your customer. You have told me that you're bringing me the things so that I can have taco night in time for taco night. So please don't show up at 7 o'clock. Please don't show up with half the order. Either one of those things is completely wrong to me, not partially right. And so I think the more teams can look at overall promise reliability, did I do what I said I was going to do? And then don't just look at the fact that you're 99% right. Spend all your time on the 1% that you're wrong, fixing those use cases, because, that scales up into an operation that really keeps trust.
You mentioned the like, don't show up with 80% of my order. You also mentioned earlier, I think, this bottleneck that was occurring specifically at Albertsons, which was adding this friction for the customer experience. So those were two really good examples of where this friction shows up. And I'm sure with Prime Day, there was additional things that just you hadn't thought of that kind of came up, on the ground. Can we hear a little bit more, maybe going back to Prime Day or a different initiative you've launched in Last Mile, where those friction points showed up and you sort of had to scramble, maybe come up with a way of removing it? And then what impact did that have for your customers?
Let's see. What are some other good examples of this? Gosh, it's one of those things where it is such an everyday activity that it's almost like there's hundreds of examples, so it's hard to find one that you would want to use. But, let's see. So other friction in the last mile delivery. Let's talk about substitutions, maybe, because we haven't talked about that yet. But if you can't deliver exactly what the customer has asked for, then you can make decisions on the fly that will still help you save the order, save the customer experience. But you really have to be inside the psychology of the consumer to be able to do that, because, sometimes it's really obvious, if you have the 5 things for taco night, just a different form of ground beef would be fine. Go ahead and substitute that. But sometimes it's a lot less obvious what would be right to substitute for a customer. So what if you don't have any iceberg lettuce to go on it? I mean, can you put arugula on your tacos? I mean, nobody really wants to put arugula on their tacos. So, this is a specific case where technology can really help, because, first of all, there is the ask the customer what they might want to have substituted, so you already know in advance. That's one solution. There's the, hey, let the picker call the customer right there in the moment and ask a question if they have to, which would be better than getting the order wrong. But then there's also many other contextual things you can bring to bear on that order. And I don't know that you would want every picker making these decisions independently, but you can surface in technology, just like you're telling them what the customer wants to pick. When they come down to that, hey, I don't see the exact form of lettuce that the customer asked for, the AI can look at that order and look at prior order history from that customer and can suggest a really good alternative. And so I think using technology all the way through the experience to try and flatten out those points of friction is really what the best of the best are doing to make orders even more reliable and accurate.
And we're talking about AI. So now let's go to the unavoidable topic of AI. And I know you're so passionate about it, and the accelerating adoption in retail. From what we see, working with so many customers out in the market, many organizations, they invest in AI-driven tools before they aligning their teams and the processes that those tools depend on, right? And in many cases, it actually adds complexity rather than removing it. So my question to you is, how do you see AI shaping the relationship between customer experience teams and the last mile operations over the next few years?
Wow. Well, you know, I what I think is fabulous about AI is that you hear about what agents are going to be able to do, and you think about the idea of my agent's going to have these goals, and your agent's going to have those goals, and now we're going to send our agents in to negotiate with each other and come to different solutions. I think that's really interesting to think about where the future of that's going to go. But if I take a step back for a minute and think about what has to be in place for AI to be successful in general, first of all, you've got to win some hearts and minds around this because every person has heard that AI is coming to take their job. That's the way AI is positioned in people's minds. And so, good luck getting AI initiatives across in a place where you've told the people, or the news has told the people, that AI is coming to take their jobs, because they'll give you every reason why it won't work and they just won't use it because they're so afraid of it. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to win hearts and minds. You've got to make people see how much more efficient their day job can be just by using the simple AI tools. Help me write my emails back instead of me having to think about all the things I want to say in this email. Just the simple ways of using AI to get comfortable with it. And then once you do that, you really need to get the organization aligned around what are the right inputs for AI. It's not about going out and buying the first cool tool that you see, because your organization's not ready for it if your processes are not standardized and your data is not clean and ready to go. If those two things are not in place, then AI cannot fix what systems have already broken. It's the same old garbage in, garbage out that software has been for decades. So I think that what organizations need to do in getting ready for AI is, first, they really need to get their team bought in that this is a good thing for the company, it's a good thing for the customer, it's a good thing for them. And once they've bought in, then you've got to do the very hard work of getting the structure of your data right and clean. And then you've got to make sure that your processes are standardized processes, because you can't automate what is not standard in the first place. And so once those things are in place, now you're ready to roll. And AI can be very exciting for what it can get done inside your company to make you more efficient, to make you more creative, to help you scale better. But first you've got to get some of those standard things right.
And based on your time in global fulfillment and digital transformation, where do you see AI making the biggest short-term impact? Is it in prediction, in routing, in forecasting, service?
I think there's two exciting ways to think about what AI is going to do. And I think I'm going to have a real hard time picking between all of those things. I mean, maybe I'd say forecasting, only because, the value of inventory or the value of your labor, those are usually two of the biggest line items on your P&L. And just, having a little bit of inventory savings, having a little bit of time savings in labor, it really can have a big impact on the P&L. So it would be hard to ignore those things. But those are still things that AI is going to do sort of inside of a system. So if you have a forecasting tool that you're using, a SaaS tool that you're using, that tool, I bet you it's getting better by the minute, because if it isn't, all of its competitors are, and there's going to be great tools available for you that AI is ingesting your data and using that to make your forecast better and better. However, I want to add something to that, because here's where I think the value of AI is going, and it's not really in the short term. But when you think about companies like Amazon and Walmart, some of the biggest companies, they have all of that software. It's often homegrown, but sometimes it's also SaaS, something that they've purchased. But there's a difference in the way those companies have woven those things together versus the way medium size and definitely not small companies, they haven't woven those things together in a way that orchestrates across systems to make decisions in real time. There's usually a data lake somewhere where you can do batch jobs, where you can make some decisions, but it's not in the moment the customer is going to make a payment or place an order. And what I see happening, besides, say, your forecasting system getting better or your delivery accuracy getting better because you can rely on all this data and AI will make those decisions better. But now if you have an orchestration system, the way those big companies have it, when the customer is standing in line to place an order, whether it's online or in a store, when they're going to place that order, if something goes wrong with that order, oh gosh, the inventory actually isn't there for us to grab it to fill the order, or one of 100 other issues, the payment tool doesn't go through, an orchestration system can make good decisions on the fly to save the order, and can make those decisions in milliseconds so that the customer experience isn't impacted. And so big companies like Amazon and Walmart and others have those systems, and they're starting to become more popular, say, in companies that are 10 or $20 billion in size. But the middle market really doesn't have tools like this, and they can be expensive to put in. And so what I'm really thinking is that, the price of orchestration is going to come to a place where, all of those systems can be easily integrated to make better overall decisions for the consumer.
That reminds me of, I'm going to go slightly off here a little bit. I saw this meme about your new AI workflow, and it was this guy who had this Rube Goldberg machine, except that he was doing all the steps. Like he like let the ball roll down, but then it didn't hit the block, so he had to go and like hit the block, and then
right.
The block was supposed to like set something else off, which didn't work, so he had to go do it. So I think that reminded me of sort of everything you're saying, which is like there's
right.
this orchestration that needs to happen. There's all these different parts, but if you don't get the foundational pieces right, you're going to have all these different teams that are trying to talk to one another and trying to orchestrate each of those little points.
Yeah, throwing balls
that's
and hitting
my question,
each other in the head as opposed to catching them.
Yeah, exactly. So my question is, obviously the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, they have all this money they can throw at AI and the customer experience. So the smaller companies are a little bit more limited and in terms of what they can focus on, especially from a last mile perspective. So I'm curious, if you were to work with one of these mid-market companies or a retailer who's trying to revamp their AI strategy as it relates to last mile, what would you tell them to focus on? Is it promise reliability? Is it accuracy? Is it, the fulfillment itself, getting that 80% versus 100%? What really is sort of the thing that they should focus in on as it relates to, again, last mile and, providing that amazing customer experience?
Right. Well, for one thing, I would say, I would counsel someone to be sure and think about these different modes of delivery as different channels. You're going to reach different customer use cases. This is not the customer who's going to drop everything and run into your store and do a shopping trip. So, if you think about the different use cases, you just have to decide how much those are worth to you based on the products you sell and the customer mindset when buying them. And for some companies that may not be important, and others it is. So once you get straight about that, we talked about the importance of forecasting and getting that right, because there's so much money to be made on those line items. But I think the main metric that I would be talking about is promised reliability. Just don't say it if you can't do it. So it's I wanted to be able to deliver groceries in an hour within a 1 hour window. So you could place an order at 10 o'clock and I would be at your house at 11 o'clock, sometime between 11 and 12 o'clock. And, in order to be able to do that, you have to start with, I just want to be able to deliver today in a 3-hour window and get that right all the time. And then I can start tightening around the edges so that I can get it to be faster for customers and in a smaller window so they don't have to stay around and wait for it. But, don't try and go immediately to I'm going to deliver in an hour within an hour window, because you're going to get that wrong. And every time you're getting it wrong, you're losing an option with that customer. They're saying to themselves, this company can't do that, so I'm going to look somewhere else. So, don't give your customers away. Make sure you're getting it right in the first place, and then tighten your promise from there.
Let's talk about leaders and laggers. Because I think we're getting to that intersection that either you lead from the front or you fall behind, especially when we see consumer expectations around delivery. It just continued to rise. But what we also see is that retailers pulling ahead in terms of investing. Some just invest more, but some invest differently. And the gap between leaders and laggers just increasingly comes down to which capabilities and metrics those organizations really prioritize. So over the next 5, 10 years, what metrics in your mind will matter most for retailers trying to deliver a seamless customer experience and last mile experience?
I'm going to start with something, because I'll say promise reliability again. I'll say that, but I'm going to say something completely different as well. Incrementality. I have found that a lot of companies struggle to understand incrementality. And when they can't understand it, they can't make good decisions. So, if you have to debate whether I added same day delivery, we talked about this use case earlier. If you have to debate whether you added same day and you got incremental customers, if someone just says, listen, I'm sure those people would have come to the store anyway, then there's no belief in incrementality. So you have to be able to do the math to show whether you've got incrementality or not. And you have to spend the time and the energy necessary to get that right, because that'll tell you what your customers want and what you need to spend more time and money on in the first place. Otherwise, it's a shot in the dark. I love what you said about, there's retailers out there that know exactly who their customer is and they want this, but not that. This is important. That is not important, because, their money doesn't go very far in being able to buy all of the different SaaS services they could possibly buy. But being very focused about what are the few that matter the most is very important. And you don't know if you can't measure what's giving you more business. And ultimately, that's really going to win the day for a C team in deciding where to put their investments.
I think that ties in really nicely with something you said earlier about not giving your customers away, and just being hyper focused on what matters to them specifically. And, going back to the example of the retailers who launch same day, maybe I don't need same day makeup or same day Lululemon leggings, right? It's a nice thought, but it's not necessarily what's going to keep me coming back or keep me in the store either. So if there's, I guess I do have a question here, not just rambling. What do you think of the technologies or capabilities that are going to help retailers understand their customers better and help them differentiate in the last mile?
Well, this is a little different than what you said, but it strikes me that in looking at incrementality of customer behaviors, that companies should be looking at the customer lifetime value and whether, adding these different products or services is really contributing to customer lifetime value, on an individual basis with many customers, and then of course in the aggregate. And I think I know the biggest and best companies use those measures, not just as a strategic measure, but literally as an operating measure to make on the fly decisions. Will this offer increase customer lifetime value with this customer? Should I make this offer, for example? So, those kinds of things I think are very important in terms of not just using them when you're in a board meeting to say, here's the incremental customer lifetime value we've added, but, right in the payments workflow, right in the place where you're deciding, do we lean in and decide this is not a fraudulent customer or not? Once you see the customer lifetime value of that customer, boy, this one's already spent $1,000 with us. I think we should lean in and say this is not a fraudulent order versus another customer who might be brand new and unknown to us. We just don't know. So, I think, bringing that type of data into these decisions is going to be really important. And then,
oh, go ahead.
Please go ahead. No, please.
No,
go
I
ahead.
was going to ask a follow up there because I think you're talking about the checkout page and conversion, and there's so many trends that we've seen, especially in that whole process, right? Delivery windows at the product description page level, green delivery, like delivery within 1 hour. Are there trends? Is there a trend that you see like on its way out or one on its way in?
Well, it's just going to keep getting faster. You can see that, DoorDash, Uber, Instacart, there's lots of companies that have made their fame and fortune on all they're doing is delivering fast. They don't own the goods. They're not a retailer, but, they're doing billions of dollars in local retail because somebody wants something fast and can't or doesn't want to go get it themselves. So I think this trend towards faster, 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 more convenient. I don't want to leave the house today, or even I live in a city, I'm not going to own a car. I'd rather pay $10 extra when I need a fast delivery. Those kinds of trade offs are being made. And so I think faster is going to be the way of the future. But it's going to be for the right use cases. We talked a minute ago about the beauty sector. The beauty sector is using these fast delivery options more often than I would have thought. And, I think if you're getting ready for an event or something special and you realize you don't have the right makeup in your house, you've run out of your favorite mascara, there are people who are saying, I'm just going to have Uber or someone go get that for me so that I can have what I need for my event. So, I think convenience, whatever convenience is and what that means to someone, I think that's what we should be focused on, because I think that the demands around that are going to get higher and higher.
So convenience is not going away. Faster deliveries, not going away. Definitely investment areas if you're a retailer out there who's not already thinking about that.
Right. You just need to know the right use cases for your customers. And, that takes a lot of, analysis, and just go stand on the sales floor and listen to why they're walking out of the store. Because a lot of those things are, I needed something today and you didn't have it now.
Design the promises. Say what you do what you say. I almost feel like this is a consistent theme throughout this conversation. Chris, last mile, the more we work with our customers, we see that it's really a transformation, and it goes across not just technology, it goes into different functions, people, adoption, processes. It's a true transformation. What leaders of last mile and in general of customer experience should adopt in terms of strategies in order to be successful here?
Yeah, I think in terms of last mile leaders, often last mile leaders are focused on cost alone. And I think ideally what you'd want is for that part of your organization to focus not just on cost, but on how they contribute to the top line as well, which means serving different use cases for customers. So, it gets tricky when you have the fulfillment organization who's only focused on cost, because sometimes the most convenient options cost more money, and it's really very different customer use cases, which then tells me that there's something else going on there. When you take these decisions up to the C team in the company, how are those cross-functional decisions getting made between the customer experience leaders and the fulfillment and operations leaders? And, I see CEOs who, some CEOs are jumping in and saying, here's the strategy for the company, here's how we should make trade-offs for the company. And they're really a sponsor for moving the company towards more use cases and understanding the incrementality of those decisions. And I think that's powerful. But, if you have a CEO who says, listen, I have 6 direct reports, they each own their own function, I'm going to let those functions, fight it out to decide how they're going to work together to make things happen, you're so stalled. You're stalled at the fact that the customer experience leader wants to grow sales, but only in a way that helps customer experience, and the operations leaders don't want to pay more cost. And you're not going to get past those stalemates. CEOs need to step in and have mandates around how they're going to sponsor new technologies and new use cases for consumers.
And this is such a fascinating conversation, so insightful. And as we discussed before, we can talk for hours about
You're really good.
Mile, but we are coming to the end of the episode. We can always do the second chapter. But I really want to leave you with one question. And the more I listen to our conversation here, I'm really thinking about those organizations that the coin just dropped and they realize that one online is taking a big portion of the revenue today. And in the online business, if you don't know how to play according to the rules of the game, you stay behind. And from some
Yeah.
reason, we see customers, they get it, they invest, they move forward, they're bold, they have aspirations, and we see the incrementality. We see them just adding more and more. Conversion rate gets better. We see lifetime value of customers growing, on-time accuracy, say what you do what you say. But then we see so many that still left behind. Many times we feel it's maybe the coin hasn't dropped yet. So let's summarize this episode. And my question to you is, if you could give one piece of advice on how leaders can improve their organization last mile performance, what would it be?
Okay. I'm going to give a couple pieces of advice, not just one. But the first
Listen,
is,
everyone, listen very carefully then.
the first is listen to your customers and understand what their use cases are. Because I think in those situations, retailers are saying, look, I know what drives my customer. Broadly, it's, maybe it's having the right fashion or having the right product or having the right aspirational look. Those kinds of things are very important to brands. But it's an and, it's not an or. You can be expanding the use cases you're giving to your customers. Gifting, as an example, in a fashion environment is important. And, using last mile delivery as a way of serving those use cases is important. So I would say, think of all of the technology around online as a way to serve your customer in new ways, and invest now in getting your data and your processes standardized so that you are ready to use AI. Because by the time you realize that you haven't, and everybody else already has these orchestration engines in place, their service is going to be so much better, it may be impossible to catch up. So I just think the important thing today is realizing all of those things your customer has loved about your company in the past are true, but this is an and you have to get it right. Because not only is AI going to change the cost structure of companies, and companies that don't participate will not be able to compete at some point in the future, but it's also growing the pie and creating more business for the retailers that choose to use it. And so I would just say, boy, I would be getting my data estate in order right now.
So true. So true. Chris, that was a joyful conversation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I know Raquel and I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else that listens to this episode learned from that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Yep. Congratulations. Thank you very much.